Some of us are born with it, and others, like the two of us, who have poor metabolisms, have had to work to get this audaciously queer.
So, what is internalized homophobia? How does it show up for us? How does it hinder us? And how can we make it over to the other side of fearless gay audacity?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective Podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to the show.
In a previous episode, we've dived into this idea of internalized homophobia, and y'all really enjoyed it. So today we're coming back with kind of a new concept. We're not only diving into internalized homophobia, but we're talking about this kind of like pipeline that exists. And I think it's also a spectrum. After having interviewed a lot of queer people throughout like the short film series that we do called Turning Heads, and just having like spoken to a lot of people, just being in community, I've really realized that there is this pipeline and you can move along it. This spectrum is very, very strong internalized homophobia on one end. And on the other end, there's gay audacity.
Ooh, spicy.
And one thing that I want to point out before we really dive into this conversation is that I think this topic can be useful still for cis, straight, heterosexual people, because really what we're talking about is confidence, self-confidence, being strong and standing in who you are. And you can see how this relates to your own life.
Can you define internalized homophobia for me, please?
Here's like the internet definition for you.
Give it to me.
It is the internalization of negative attitudes and beliefs about homosexuality, resulting in feelings of shame, self-hatred, and reluctance to openly identify as LGBTQ2S+. With these internet definitions, they can sound a little stiff, but how does this actually show up for someone?
I feel like a lot of what showed up for me, especially when I was young, because to be honest, I was afraid to be queer. I was one of those people in my teens that was like super supportive of queer people, but at the same time, I was like, can't be me. I was honestly afraid of what people would say, what people would think, how people would start to categorize me differently and see me differently, and how that would change their view and perception of me. And especially as a teen, you don't want more confusion and you don't want necessarily more eyes on you in that way, because you're already so insecure about so many things, and there's puberty and then there's crushes and then you still have to get the grades, and it's just like a lot. For me, the things that I saw in the media was probably one of the most prominent. So there were two things, what I saw in the media and then just culturally what I saw growing up, because I come from a Colombian background. Culturally in Colombia at the time, I know it's definitely gotten better since then, the people who were queer or gay or lesbian or whatever were definitely outcasts. They hung out with a specific group of people. To be openly out as queer pretty much immediately cast you out onto a separate group of people. They were the other. It wasn't the general population. It wasn't the quote unquote normal people. It was this other group. And to be cast out seemed like the most horrible thing to me. So I didn't want to be that. To see that as the representation of like, this is what it is to be queer when I was really little was like, not something that I wanted for myself. It wasn't the kind of future that I wanted. I didn't want to be considered weird or be considered an outcast or not have the same opportunities or just have this like really negative perception by other people put onto me. I wanted nothing to do with it. So I was like, I support queer people, but it ain't me, y'all. So growing up, I already had that like mentality from when I was like a child, right? And then seeing things in the media, even when we finally started to have queer representation, it was very much trauma based, right? Like queer people were their trauma. And I was like, ooh, that sounds like a lot. I really don't want that in my life. I don't want all of these emotions. I'm already going through so much, you know?
Yeah, either you're your trauma or you're the comedic relief.
Exactly. And I didn't want to be either. I don't want my personality to be the comedic relief for other people. It's like, what about my comedic relief? What, you know? I don't want to be this like tokenized queer character in somebody else's story. Like, I want to be my own main character.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is like, I think everyone grows up feeling like you are your own main character. Obviously, it's like you live inside your own head. Yeah. And sometimes you even think you're like, is all of this just like a dream and you're all here just for me?
Yeah,
Sometimes
yeah.
you think
Sometimes
that, especially when you're growing up.
For sure. When you're little, you're like, I am the main character in this movie. Like, if you see, literally, when I was growing up, if you watch like any movie, I would be like, I am that person. That's me.
Take on their whole personality.
Yeah, I was like, I'm Spider-Man. I'm Anne Hathaway. I'm like, that's me. I didn't want to be that like background character that just like comes in and like they're the joke, you know, or like they're the trauma. That's how internalized homophobia showed up for me. And that's why I didn't want to like be queer. I like ran away from it for a little bit. Honestly, it took a lot to work through it and like be okay with myself. And I'm still exploring what it means to be myself.
For me, I grew up and was raised in Canada. For me, the internalized homophobia really came from a lack of self-confidence. One thing that you said that really stood out to me was that you didn't want to stand out for the wrong reasons. To me, it's like I loved being the center of attention.
Of course.
But only for the right reasons.
Classic.
You know, like I desperately wanted to fit in. When I was younger, I've spoken about this a lot on the podcast. I was like freely, so wildly myself, you know, lost that piece of me.
Yeah.
And that was like really, really the most challenging parts of my life were losing that part of myself and feeling so deeply insecure and so depressed.
Yeah.
And that also came with the internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I was suppressing so much of myself and who I really was that it was such a painful time for me. It's funny because 4 years before that, at the same high school that I went to, my sister went there and she spoke about how homophobic everybody was. So I think my fears were coming from a real place.
Right.
But for me, I was really, really scared to come out to even some of my like closest friends. The friends that I had made, a lot of them were based off of this personality that I had crafted, you know, to fit it. And it wasn't the real me. So I felt like they probably wouldn't
like the real you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I thought maybe they'd be homophobic or maybe they would just think like, even just like referencing kind of like the Mean Girls kind of vibe where it's like Regina George literally saying, I mean, I couldn't have a lesbian at my party. There are going to be other girls there in their bathing suits. I mean, right? She was a lesbian, like shit like that, you know? It's like, I thought that was what everyone was going to think of me.
Yeah. It's like, oh, not the lesbian. That's the weird one.
Yeah. And then think about all the times that maybe we had like even just like harmlessly like kissed at parties, you know? It's like in high school, our friends would like kiss each other. And,
I never did that because I was not cool. I was very dweeby. Yeah. But you did that. Okay.
But I did that and I was just worried about what they would think about it and if they would overthink it and then not want to be my friend anymore. And it did, like, reflecting back on it, it's like those are the things I thought about. And it's so strange because right after high school, I went to college and I ended up living with some of my friends that I had in high school. And it kind of kept me in the closet for a bit. Right. For a lot of people, it's like the second you go to university or college, it's like, okay, I'm free. I can finally be myself. But I had chosen to stay with those friends. I think just because I was a bit nervous to like break out on my own probably. But I had started dating girls online, but I would mainly only see them when I'd go back home because my mom moved from my hometown to Mississauga, which is like a bigger city than where I was raised. And I would just like go on Tinder and like desperately swipe. Anytime I'd like come home from college, I'd be so excited. I'm like, the gays, they're closer to Toronto. I was in London, Ontario. It's kind of a homophobic town, to be totally honest.
Yeah. I mean, I would do the same. I would come to Toronto a lot for dance workshops and classes in particular and like auditions and stuff. Yeah. So like whenever I was in Toronto, it's like bing, 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 bing.
You're so excited. You're just on
Whenever
Tinder.
I was in Kitchener, I was like, I'm just going to delete the app. Like,
literally, what's the point?
There's no point.
Yeah. But I would go on dates like secretly and not tell my roommates. And it was like so weird. It's like really they wouldn't have cared. You know what I mean? If I was just open and honest, it's like they cared about me. They wouldn't have cared, you know, by that point. But it was so internalized is the problem. It's like I thought everybody cared so fucking much, but no one really does.
What would have happened if randomly by surprise one of your friends came out? Like, would you have cared?
So that's kind of part of it too. Is in high school I was on the rugby team, and in 1 year I think 6 girls in a row came out as lesbians
I mean,
or bisexual.
saw that coming with rugby.
Classic. But that's actually when I started questioning it, because I'm like, oh, I think it a little bit gave me permission. I'm like, wow,
Right.
they're like coming out and it's fine for them. And I felt like I had made a friend group in high school though. And I'm like, but my friends won't be okay with it, you know? And like, I was kind of half in both worlds. Like my friends on the rugby team, I'm like, they'd be cool with it. And I was kind of trying to veer over in that direction a bit more, but I was like, I'm still in both ponds.
Right. It's going well for these rugby girls, but I have other friends outside of rugby
Who
and
might judge me.
I'm just not sure.
Yeah, and I had a long-term boyfriend at the time too.
Oh.
It was just a lot, and just like thinking back in my head, it's majority of it was internalized, you know? And that's why I think this conversation is important, because the more I talk to people who are in the community and the more I really like dive into other people's stories, I'm realizing this is such a common experience for people.
Yeah.
This notion of losing yourself and refinding yourself. And one way that we really saw this present is in the circle.
For those of you that don't know, it's a social media game where you can come in as yourself or as a catfish. And basically, you get to the end by making relationships, forming alliances, and essentially voting each other out. But I think it is the perfect visual representation of what people fear when they're afraid to be vulnerable and be themselves and have a fear of what other people think. For example, we saw a plus-size girl coming in, as they put it, their hot, skinny friend, and she said, with my mind and her looks, we're sure to win this thing, right? And throughout the game, eventually she reveals who she is and posts her own photos on there for people to know who she is. But initially, she was scared. We see this when it comes to all different kinds of internalized issues that we hold. Usually, it's from trauma that you experience growing up. If you get fat shamed, then you're going to be a little bit more apprehensive about showing who you are.
Yeah, if you're bullied, if you hear a lot of leaders in your community speak poorly about queer people, about fat people, it can get into your mentality.
The hardest thing to be and the bravest thing to be is your truest, most authentic self. Because sometimes, depending on the groups that you are surrounded by, geographically or culturally, that can put you in danger, emotional danger, physical danger even. There's always going to be somebody that judges you. Like, no matter what. Honestly, even if you fit society's standards of like what's passable, there's people that are so against society's standards that are going to judge you for being within society's standards. So there's always going to be people that judge you because you're not like them.
It's so true. So you might as well just be yourself.
It's true.
And embrace the people who relate to you, because honestly, that's when you find your tribe. The people who make you feel so good is when you are expressing yourself to your truest extent, because you're attracting them.
Yeah.
And that's when life really starts to feel aligned and good. Before we dive into the element of gay audacity, I kind of wanted to chat about how you recognize when it is actually internalized homophobia versus like a genuine scary situation, because there is homophobia out there. It's real. Sometimes we do need to protect our safety.
Absolutely.
You know, that is a real thing. But how do we recognize and decipher the difference there? And how can we overcome internalized homophobia?
You know, that's an excellent question, because internalized homophobia often comes from those real scenarios where you actually feel unsafe and you feel like your emotional, mental, or physical health is at risk.
So I think the best way to decipher the difference is through self-reflection. Really unpacking your own emotions in a certain situation. Just kind of like sussing out how these people actually feel towards queer people and asking like broad general questions that can help you get the answer. You know what I mean? And really determine whether it's just in your own mind or if everyone around you is actually feeling that way. One way to do that is just like asking questions like, how do you feel about this queer speaker? Or maybe you just say like, I've been watching this queer TV show. What do you think about it? You know?
Sussing out the vibes first just to see if you are actually onto something or if it's just your own internalized homophobia.
And I mean, with some people, it's like there might be a little bit of like homophobia and prejudice that exists there, especially if you're talking to older generations that you're trying to come out to.
Yeah.
Like when I would do that with my grandma, she would say a little bit of homophobic stuff sometimes when I would ask these questions, these probing questions.
Yeah.
And it did keep me for a minute from coming out to her. But at the end of the day, it's like some people, they're so close to you that it's still worth it to be your authentic self to them. 100% of the time, it's always worth it to be yourself. But it's just a helpful tool, this kind of like probing to determine whether it's just in your own head or if it's real and actually there and something to be concerned about. With my baba, my grandma, it was something to be a bit concerned about for sure. It was a more challenging conversation. But with my friends from high school, I don't think it was, you know? And I think if I had like asked them more questions and got out of my own head, I would have realized that. A TV show that is queer also that I think would give a lot of people an in is Queer Eye. I think it brings a lot of people together. It's a really like loving show that shows so many different sides of queer people.
Yeah.
And I think that's a nice show if you want to try and watch it with your parents and suss out their vibe, or you want to try and watch it with your friends and suss out their vibe. That's a good one to do it with.
Yeah, it's a pretty wholesome one.
There's
no sex scenes or anything.
Yeah.
Family friendly, PG.
Yeah, where's the L word? I wouldn't watch that with my mom.
Oh my God.
Another really good point is sitting down with yourself and maybe even writing it out and journaling. And I like to do tables. I'm not a big like paragraph writer, but doing tables and really writing down, it's like, think about every single fear that you have in regards to this specific situation. Maybe it's a crowd of people at school, at family. It's like, write down the things that they've tangibly done that have made you think that they would be homophobic or hateful towards you.
Right.
And then on the other side, you can write down things that you know have only come from inside your head. And I think that's a really good way to sit down and reflect on whether or not it's internalized or actually a tangible homophobic situation.
Let's talk about the other side of the spectrum. Gay audacity, darling.
It's what we all want, you know?
Truly.
I want to walk through the world with absolutely no shame. And I think to this day, I still hold a little bit of it, for sure. It's like, it's been a long journey for me, and I don't think I'm fully at the other end.
At the audacity bit.
We've had the pleasure of interviewing people where I'm like, they are the
They
polar.
are gay audacity.
They're
look it up.
end.
That's their picture shows up.
I respect it so much. And I think also watching this season of Drag Race, season 15, when RuPaul was like talking to Lux Noir and we're like, you're so fucking gay. It's like, that's what gay audacity is. It's like, you're just so fucking gay. And like,
you just don't care.
And you mean it in a compliment though. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm so proud of you for being that effing gay.
It takes a lot of gall. It takes a lot of bravery and so much confidence. I have never, maybe not never, but I haven't seen somebody so confident as Lux Noir London and I don't even know how long. Like, I don't even know if I have at all.
Yeah.
Like, she's so confident.
That it's delusional.
It's
and I love
literally
it.
delusional.
but that's what gay audacity is, though. It's
so
delusion.
audacious.
It's like this delusion of thinking that you can do fucking anything. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I love that, though. It's like, that's the kind of confidence that I want to walk around the world with.
You know what? I feel like gay audacity is the equivalent of like cis white hetero male confidence. Okay, I know that you've experienced this in your business degree when you were in school, and I definitely experienced this when I was in engineering school when it was 99% dudes surrounded me, which was like they were so confident. They were like, I know the answer. I know that I'm right. I know that for you in business school, they were like, I have so many good ideas. I just have to pick one. Like the confidence is like, you can build like 50 different businesses and you're that confident in all 50 of them. Are you kidding me? You're delusional, darling.
Yeah.
Same thing with like these engineering dudes. They were like, oh yeah, that's really easy. This is the answer. I'm like, I don't think that you're right, but the way that you said it made me believe that you're right. And now I'm I think that I'm wrong just because you said it like that.
And sometimes it can be a little bit harmful. You can lose people some money by doing that, but also you can make a lot of money and you can be very successful as well.
And you can go really far.
100% off of delusion.
Isn't that what it takes?
To a certain extent, I respect it. I think sometimes it goes a little far, for sure.
Anything can go far.
Anything can go a little too far, but I do respect it, and I do wish I could like conjure more of that confidence.
Yeah. I would say to a healthy amount. It's a slippery slope. Yeah. It's like you're climbing the Audacity ladder and then you just slip right in and then there's no coming back.
Yeah.
Like you're gone. So without falling in, I want to reach the tip.
Would you be able to define for me what gay audacity is?
Yes. Gay audacity is the courage, the boldness to be authentically 100% yourself without apology, regardless of any discrimination or societal pressure to be different.
So the gall, the nerve.
The nerve, the uniqueness, charisma, nerve, and talent to be gay and audaciously gay. And it is a term that is often used within the queer community to describe someone who is living authentically and proudly as a queer person. Without giving a damn.
So have you ever felt gay audacity? Because like we said, it's a sliding scale. It can change from day to day. Some days you can feel that. For some people, it's like they feel it every effing day. And for some people like ourselves, it's like you kind of like slide to and fro a little bit. You know? So has there ever been a day where you felt 100% at gay audacity?
Yeah, I have spurts. I have my little spurts moments.
What did it feel like? Can you tell us a moment where you felt it?
The times that I have felt it have been when I've been surrounded by queer people. Like fully. Like pretty much 100% or like 99%. I think that when you're in a room full of people where you know for sure that they're just going to accept you for who you are. They don't care about who you're dating, what your preferences are, whatever. They're just like, you're a person. I accept that. Moving on. That's so freeing. So I have felt this at our events that we put together. I have felt this at other queer events. I have felt this at queer raves. It's just like these places that are intentionally made to be radically free and queer and expressive. That's where I have really felt like that audacity. Like, I'm going to be extra today and nobody can tell me different. I'm going to exaggerate myself and just fully express what I'm feeling. And everyone is going to be on board. Like, that's so freeing.
I think that's actually what like pride means to me.
Just
being surrounded by queer people and known allies, you know what I mean? It's like, and you know that it's like allies and the queer community is so deep in that moment that even when there's protesters, you feel so strong. You know, it's like everyone stands and blocks them, you know, and that feels so powerful.
It's like, you know, that you don't just have like allyship among these random strangers that you've never met. You also have accomplices. They're like, yes, I'm gonna defend you even though I've never met you before, and you're gonna be you, honey,
and
like,
I'm gonna cheer you on.
I love that.
It feels so good, and I think that is like a really special magical place to curate. That really is what like community does for you. Is it uplifts you, it pushes you towards gay audacity. And I love that. I really love that. People who are 100% always at gay audacity, it's like it doesn't matter to them who's surrounding them. All that matters is themselves, and I think that's so cool. And I wish I could be there, and I hope to one day be there. You know, it's like for me, I still have a little bit of apprehension
for sure.
Sometimes like I still get a little bit nervous depending on who I am, even though we really are like our whole lives are queer, the two of us. It's like we are very much like audaciously queer in so many aspects of our lives, but it's like sometimes when I'm surrounded by the wrong crowd, I get a bit of social anxiety and I get a bit nervous. It's like I don't know what your intentions are, and it worries me, but I love to be in those spaces where I can be myself. And it's like sometimes I feel bad about the way that our society is segregated. There has to be specifically queer events. There has to be all these like separate spaces, you know? Sometimes I do feel bad about it. Like I wish wish things could be more integrated.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like the way that society was built to be against us
Yeah.
makes it important that we have those spaces, you know?
Yeah.
And I think this conversation is really reconnecting me to why that is important to have our own spaces. And it's like, yeah, allies are 100% welcome, but know that this is our space and this is where we are going to be audaciously queer.
Yeah.
And you have to show up and meet us there.
You know, I think audacity, like true audacity, comes from two places. And the first one is like that bravery to be audaciously queer outside of what feels comfortable. Like, I think that is probably the definition of audacity. So, like, it's easy to feel it when you feel safe, right? I feel like the real audacity is when you step outside of that safety and you challenge yourself to be audaciously gay in a space where you're just not sure.
Yeah.
Like that, and that takes courage. That takes a lot of bravery. And I really admire the people that are brave like that every freaking day. Like that takes so much. And they're like paving the path. They're leading the way. And the people that are like just behind them or a few steps behind them or all the way at the back have it so much easier because of them. Like so much easier.
Yeah.
And
you take a lot of like that.
The weight.
A lot of the weight. You take a lot of the criticism, a lot of the homophobia. It's like it hits you first. You're at the front line.
Exactly.
You know?
I feel so privileged and like thankful for those that continue to lead the way, and I hope that I can carry that I am carrying and can continue to carry and even carry more of that weight for others and for to take a little bit off their shoulders as well. But I will never carry as much weight as the first people who paved the way for queer rights in North America. Trans women of color that led the marches.
Because there are people who can't hide themselves.
They can't hide themselves. And not only a lot of them went to prison. A lot of them would get arrested, incarcerated, killed. The audacity to be yourself in those moments, in those first initial moments where they were paving the path and making history.
But one thing I will say is like it's not done around the whole world, and it's something that is undoing in the States and has the potential to be undone here in Canada. So while we do have so many rights here and so many people to thank here in North America, it's like the fight isn't over, especially when people in other countries are suffering and struggling. It's like that's where our allyship and our voice is needed.
Yeah, and I think that that's where we can step up.
One thing that we do want to say is that the two can coexist: internalized homophobia and gay audacity.
They coexist within me right now.
Constantly they coexist. And honestly, this conversation has inspired me, I think, to be more of myself, you know. Especially we're filming this right now before I'm about to like go home for an Easter weekend with like my whole extended family, and that's usually like 25 to 30 people. And sometimes around your family, it's like, well, they've known you throughout this whole like awkward process of your life. Is like sometimes you can revert back and you can feel like you're showing up not 100% yourself. And it's a good reminder to me to know that all of that, like I've come out of the closet to every single one of them and they've all been welcoming. You know what I mean? Like there is no reason for me to show up as anything but myself. I think like at a pride event or at like just like in a gay bar in general, like when you see so many other queer people around you who are so freely expressing themselves, it feels powerful. It's moving, you know? Like I feel like I've almost cried throughout this conversation because I'm like thinking back to these moments where I felt so strong, you know? And like that feels like so cool. And it's like I want to bring that feeling into other parts of my life. Also just with like us being entrepreneurs, like I want to kind of tie this conversation into what we were saying at the beginning, where I was like, this ties into just self-confidence in general, and it can relate to anybody, you know. This conversation doesn't just have to be for queer people. I think in general I've been feeling a little bit of like a lack of self-confidence lately. I think this is just a good reminder to like tap into that like self-love.
Absolutely, because to be honest, there's so many people that are so confident to the point where they're delusional and then here we are sitting at home on the couch, life's passing you by. We deserve that same confidence. What makes them more worthy of confidence than us? Like, no, nothing. You're not unworthy of confidence. You're not unworthy of bravery and authenticity. Tap into it and create it for yourself, because there's plenty of people out there that are gonna want to bring you down. There's no shortage of people that want to see you fail, and there's only a little tiny handful of people that want to see you succeed. So you have to bring that gay audacity out.
So true.
Fuck those people that want to see you fail. They don't even know you.
Be your own ally. It's like, do your research, stand up for yourself. If you hear someone saying something that's like even just remotely, mildly microaggressive towards queer people, it's like,
shut it down.
Towards anyone, you know?
Shut
like,
it down now.
Literally, shut that ish down and like do your research, figure out how to shut it down and how to shut it down with confidence, because you deserve to have confidence and you deserve to feel safe in the spaces that you're in.
We have this philosophy in the street dance community. There's often people that will come into the cypher, which is like the dance circle for those that don't know. They'll drop in, huge freaking ego, do all of like the hype moves, like crazy shit, leave it on the dance floor, and then just walk away without respecting who's in the circle, respecting other dancers. They just came here to show off. And I feel like that's the same kind of energy of like people trying to shut you down with negativity without even knowing you, and just trying to spread hate. And the solution to that, you do your training, you know your facts, you say, hey, wait, where are you going? You bring them back in the circle, you battle them, leave it all on the floor, show them what's up, and then, okay, you can go now.
Period.
You know what I mean? Then they got nothing else to say. You can't just walk into a room, disrespect everyone, and leave.
Bottom line, there's no reason to spread hate in this world for other people who are just showing up as their authentic selves. And that's always what I bring it back to when people comment negatively on our videos, on any of our social media accounts, in person. You know, it's like there's no reason to spread hate to other people who are just trying to spread love and who are just trying to love themselves. End of the day, your voice deserves to be heard. You know?
Yeah,
and that's kind of where I want to leave this one, I think.
So that's everything that we have for you today. If you want to dive deeper into internalized homophobia, click this video right over here. Make sure you hit subscribe, and until next time, peace.